And away we go. It's the DFS Alert presented by Awesemo.com, brought to you in part by Yahoo Sports DFS. Don't forget to check them out for a whole new way to play daily fantasy sports, pricing, roster construction, all different way over there. Also, the $10 that you can get into on most nights. Also, a different slate of games, sometimes with the all-day slates. That can be fun as well. Dave Loughran, Dan Strafford with you. Happy to be here on this Wednesday morning, May the 1st. Dave, how you doing?
Not bad, man. We've, it's baseball season, but basketball's been wild. Boston hands it to Milwaukee in game one. Game's basically tied up going into halftime, game two. And then Milwaukee runs away with it. And then you got the Sixers getting smoked in game one, holding on in game two despite Joel Embiid being sick. But really the best thing, and we have yet to get there, we're kicking this pod off right before tip for the Warriors and Rockets. A whole lot of, upset Rockets fans and players and disgruntled fans over the refereeing, the officiating in game one. And I saw so many tweets that night. It's like, if they're going to screw us, at least bring in Scott Foster to do the job. Well, lo and behold, they did. And now he's reffing tonight, who is the same guy that they believe cost them the series last season. So whatever you do, hopefully you caught game two of this, what is, pretty much the finals. It's the greatest series we're getting this year. So, basketball, NBA or postseason basketball has been awesome, man.
Yeah, I agree. And I actually randomly at a liquor store locally, the owner caught my ear and was talking about playoff hockey, and that playoff hockey is the best.
Oh, it is.
Of all. I agree with them. And I actually brought up what you just said similarly, though, of that the NBA this season has given us a little bit more. And that the plot lines have thickened, and we've gotten a little bit more villain, good guy aspect to some of these series. And I can't believe that there's part of me that's rooting for the Warriors. Like, there's part of me now that because of the way that the Rockets went about their report about 2018 and leaking that to the media, and now this story coming out. Listen, James Harden's a talented player. Chris Paul, very talented. Mike D'Antoni has done a great job with this roster. But I have a hard time watching James Harden kick out his legs.
So you think those were not fouls, correct?
I think it's a gray area. I don't think it's cut and dry where he is able to do these things and say, I'm fouled every time. I think he's initiating a lot more contact. And to be fair, there's more scrutiny on shots outside the three-point arc. Like, when you do that in the lane, you get more calls. It seems like he's trying to initiate the contact, and I think that causes problems. Now, Draymond Green probably causes a little bit more contact than is necessary. He closes out a little bit harder than some other players. But when Harden's kicking those legs out in what seems like unnatural motion, I have a tough time caring about the fact that he may have been fallen into as he lands on the ground.
Look, I hear you. I actually asked Twitter. I was curious what they thought, and it was split down the middle. A lot of answers split right down the middle.
And I think that's why I say I think it's gray. And I wouldn't have begrudged the refs for calling it, right? The contact was there. The whole Scott Foster storyline is peak Real Housewives. Like, it seems like it's written for a soap opera rather than the National Basketball Association. But here we are. As Dave said, we're about ready for tip-off as we start recording. I'm sure we will discuss as it goes on if anything crazy happens. But nonetheless, we do have a 5-game early slate, and that's what we're going to focus on here because we're the first content you'll get from Awesemo.com. You do get an MLB strategy show. You get the deep dive, the deeper dive, and then live before lock. So lots of content to cover you off. But we're going to cover off on this 5-game early slate. Make sure you're prepped and ready to go with our first take here. And it's actually a decent slate. There might be some weather in Texas again that you want to keep an eye on. But we have 5 games. that are all worth breaking down. Dave, I'll ask you live here. Do you prefer, do you want to go position by position, or do you want to go game by game?
We can do game by game. There's only 5 of them.
Yeah, let's do that. So we have Oakland and Boston to begin. I did go to the Rays-Sox game on Sunday. A lot of fun. My kids' elementary school had a fundraiser. You bought tickets. We all sat together. Kids got to run the bases after the game. I, in fact, got to take my 20-month-old running around the bases, which was a crazy experience. And I know it sounds corny, but being a baseball fan of all my life, running on the bases at Fenway was pretty damn cool. But also the Red Sox lost. So it was a win-win for me, where the kids got a great experience and the Red Sox lost. They have a matchup here with the Oakland Athletics. You get Mike Fiers against Hector Velasquez, a game that, these are two teams that are trying to find their identities right now. You've seen the Red Sox be up and down. The A's have a fairly potent offense. The pitching staff will be a question mark for a large majority of the year. As we look at this game, considering over-under, considering matchup, considering what these two rosters have, how do you see this one breaking down?
I think you have a Boston team that has struggled mightily, but still has a phenomenal offense. And it's funny because DraftKings decided to finally price them up. They didn't decide to do it against Aaron Brooks, but against Mike Fiers they did. So, look, I'm still you're going to bet on talent when given the opportunity. And these guys are expensive, but going up against Mike Fiers, I mean, it's going to be really tough to get away from that, right? At Fenway Park, Fiers is not very good, and he's not the same guy that could rack up the strikeouts and bunches. He's just happy to get out of an inning without getting, or to get out of a start without getting shelled. I don't think it comes as a surprise to anyone that, Boston's run total is very high. Pulling it up right now, just filtering from the early or from the all day to the early, but they are at right now, what is it, 5.5, I think, or something ridiculous. Oh, you know what? They are not. Oh, yeah, sorry, 5.4. 5.4. I mean, yes, I very much like Boston here. And it'll be interesting to see if they're that popular, because you have Shelby Miller on the mound for Texas. The highest implied total on the slate is going to be Pittsburgh. And then even a 5.1 total for Texas against Jameson Taillon. And these guys had been very much underpriced on a bunch of sites. So we'll see how that plays out. But I definitely like the Boston bats here. Outside of that, though, Hector Velasquez gives you really no upside. You're not going to get any strikeouts from him. You're not going to get him to pitch deep into games anyway. And, of course, Mike Fiers is way off my radar.
I want to confirm here, and as we go live, sometimes this happens. We do have 5 games on this slate. I know DraftKings has them listed. MLB.com and ESPN both have 4 games as of right now, but we had the rain out that became a doubleheader, right? I want to confirm here. We have Oakland, Boston, Tampa Bay, Kansas City, Pittsburgh, Texas, Yankees, Arizona, and Baltimore.
Yes, you do. Right. You have 2 doubleheaders. One between – you have the Rays Royals doubleheader and the Baltimore the White Sox Orioles doubleheader.
All right. Just confirming, because ESPN and MLB.com have yet to update. But I knew that was the case when reading the news earlier. Just want to make sure as we go through here.
The reason they're both on the early slate, though, is because both of these were the regular scheduled games. Yeah, the game 2s are going to come after the 1 p.m. game for Tampa and Kansas City, and then after the 4:10 game for Baltimore and Chicago.
All right, so in that game, obviously with Hector Velasquez, the Oakland offense stands out a bit too. I know Velasquez is a right-hander, and you have a ton of right-handed power, but I don't really trust Velasquez to keep the ball in the yard in that game. So any specific bats that you like between Fiers and Velasquez's matchup? I assume Betts, Benintendi, Martinez are all in play, but any specific one-offs that you like most of all?
No real one-offs, but I think Bogaerts continues to be a really strong play at a shortstop position that really isn't that great. Martinez is still sub 5K on DraftKings, and you're going to keep targeting him there. He on by the way, on Yahoo, you don't really see a lot of the early slate games. So I'm trying to see if we can pull any. I don't think we have any. Like, we have the all day game or the 13 game that starts at 3 p.m. But and then like, oh wow, that's crazy. So you have 17 game slate, the all day slate. That's insane. But how are they? I don't know how you're going to pull that off. I don't know how you're going to pull that off with
two of the same. Like your rosters are the same.
Yeah, you know what? They'll probably go in and manually fix that, would be my guess. This may be like an automated all day thing. It has to. You can't do that, right? There's no way you could do that. Pricing would have to be different for the matchups. And what do they get points for? Unless they only get points for the early. I don't know that.
Well, I mean, it wouldn't be 17 games then, right? Like,
well, of course, but I'm saying it might just say 17. It might be an automated. It might.
Right. Yeah. I think you're right. It can't do that. No,
I don't see how you could.
You wouldn't be able to do that unless they were somehow able to back end say certain scores matter for one game or whatever it might be. But no, I don't see that being the way that works out. Let's go to our next game, which is Tampa Bay, Kansas City, a matchup I believe to be confirmed of Junis against Stenek as the opener, and then Jalen Beeks is the last rumored long reliever that I saw. I don't know if that was completely confirmed by Tampa Bay or not, but I believe that is last I saw. A game that, again, to Dave's point, you have a doubleheader because of a rain out on Tuesday, which could lead to some interesting lineup construction from both teams as they try to consider what they have as options as the day goes on, simply from a who's available, who's not perspective. But it does look like a game that we'll have to consider here for some potential offense. Junis has shown some strikeout upside. Tampa Bay's offense, though, has been very good. Beeks, a bit of a pedigree. Pretty sure he was a Red Sox farmhand before being dealt to Tampa Bay.
He actually pitched a couple major league games with Boston.
That's right.
It was terrible.
What do you got here? It doesn't feel like either of these pitchers are necessarily in dynamic spots, but on a 5-game slate, we're going to have to make some sort of concessions in roster construction. What do you think of this one from a pitching perspective?
Yeah, well, from a pitching perspective, I wish it was going to be Blake Snell. I can tell you that much. Do we have confirmation that he's pitching the early game?
I haven't seen that. I saw again that this was the confirmed.
No, it looks like you're right. You're right.
Yeah, that they just pushed him back to the night game.
You're right. It looks like that sucks, huh? I mean, Jalen Beeks has decent strikeout stuff when he can hit his spots. It's not the craziest idea. The Royals have a lot of strikeouts against lefties too. He threw 75 pitches last time out, 4 2/3 innings, 3 innings before that. I think to get him to 4 or 5 innings, 5 innings would be like max. He'd have to be, close to perfect, right? So that's there are worse long relievers out there, and there are worse matchups. Actually, that really solid long relief appearance he had last time out came against Kansas City, 25.5 DraftKings points. I mean, very solid. But you'd be hard pressed to feel confident in that. The thing is, what other pitchers are you going to look at here that you really like? I mean, Beeks might actually make sense just because the pitching pool here is ugly, and I think you could make somewhat of an argument for Jake Junis as well. He's the type of guy that can have some solid starts. When he misses his spots, he misses bad and he gets hit hard, and they usually result in home runs. As we know, he's already allowed 5 home runs and 6 starts, so not as bad as you would have thought. And he's striking out a batter per inning. I think in a slate like this, there's one pitcher that we're going to talk about in a moment who I think will probably be uber chalk, but outside of that, it's going to be tough, man. You've got Fenway with two very unappealing pitchers. You got Tex in Arlington, Globe Life, and then David Hess, and yeah, it's pretty rough, man. You probably will see ownership on Beeks and Jake Junis, and I wouldn't blame anybody for it.
Yep, and you do have, again, we're dealing with sample size issues, and we're trying to figure out exactly when to flip the switch to 2019 stats. But if you take active roster of the Tampa Bay Rays for 2018, so players currently active on their roster, but their stats from 2018, which is a little bit misleading because they have some youngsters and they have some guys who didn't get a ton of at-bats in 2018, but they're third overall in K percentage against right-handed pitchers. That's a K percentage of 25.7%. Now that goes along with a 1.78 ISO and a 0.327 WOBA, which is pretty high end from this stat sorting. But again, the strikeouts may be there for this situation at the top end, and I may. Do you ever consider Stanek? Like, do you ever consider that this guy's been really solid? Striking out he has 14 Ks over what is his inning total? 15 innings pitched, and he's pitching 1 2/3. All right, just checking.
Checking. The most he'll ever pitch is 2 innings, and he's not even minimum salary.
Right, that's a fair point. As I was talking through that, I realized that Beeks was in fact a lefty. So as I was quoting those stats, the right. Rays.
And Beeks isn't even much more expensive than him.
No. And so in 2019, and again, small sample size, the K percentage for Rays batters against left-handed pitchers is, what is it right now? It's 29.1%, 268 plate appearances. The Ks may be there for Beeks, and to Dave's point, on a 5-game slate, it may just be where you need to go. Not a ton of options, and may have some upside enough to get you by with some upside bats as you try to make your way through construction. If you were to go against these pitchers, any specific bats that you find intriguing? Tampa Bay has some power upside guys. Same with Kansas City. Is there anyone who stands out, or are you just willing to sort of roll the dice with a stack or two?
I think both offenses, well, I don't love Kansas City here, but Tampa Bay is not a crazy option, and the reason would be simple. Like I said, when Junis misses, he misses bad, and it can get really ugly fast. He's had those games with 3 home runs allowed, 4 home runs. I'm not saying I expect that to be the case, but on a short slate like this, where almost all of your ownership, my guess, will be in Texas, Pittsburgh, Boston, and Chicago against David Hess, it's not crazy to think that Tampa Bay could be a decent lower-owned stack option here. To me, it actually makes quite a bit of sense because they do have some good bats scattered throughout this lineup as well. The only downside is that Austin Meadows is still hurt.
All right, let's continue on as we look at these 5 games. You have Pittsburgh and Texas. You already made mention of Shelby Miller, 5,800 on DK. I mentioned that because it seems too expensive. But you have Tyon on the other side. Pittsburgh, I assume, is going to be upwards of 40 to 50% owned here. This seems like the prime spot for the Pittsburgh Pirates to have a gigantic day.
Yeah. I mean, dude, Shelby Miller is just garbage. He is really bad. And then you bring him back to Globe Life, things are only going to get worse for him, man. I honestly think this is one of these games where Shelby Miller has his worst start of the year. Now, there's nothing about Pittsburgh's offense that really is all that appealing, but at the same time, the location is, the pitcher, it's going to be 80 plus degrees. Yep. It's starting to warm up. Just go down the line of bats here for Pittsburgh, and we're going to be able to make an argument from all. Unfortunately, Cervelli left this game, so but catcher sucks anyway. So and then really the only other downside is that a lot of these guys are a little, well, actually no, the only ones that are really pricey would be Josh Bell. Outside of that, like even Marte is pretty cheap. Polanco, Tucker, Colin Moran, Jung Ho Gong. Adam Frazier. Yeah, actually, the prices on these Pittsburgh bets are really good.
Yeah, I think you have a ton of upside. You made mention of Bell at 4,800, but beyond that, Frazier is what, 4K flat in the outfield. You deal with Marte at 4,400, Polanco at 4,300, Melky Cabrera is 3,900. It seems like that's going to be a very popular stack, depending on where you go and where the lineup falls. Again, it's a day game after a night game, so we may get some potential bats in lineup that we don't often see. That is always something that can help out even further with some savings. But this should be a gigantic upside spot for the Pittsburgh Pirates. What about Taillon from your perspective for Pittsburgh?
No, look, Jameson Taillon's a good pitcher, but I want nothing to do with him here. You're talking about a guy who is, first of all, going into a really, really rough park against a team that is very good against right-handed pitching with plenty of power. And you look at Jameson Taillon for his career, he is a good pitcher, but he's still allowing a 323 WOBA to left-handed hitters. Not a lot of home runs, but only 18% strikeouts. That's not going to serve him well here. Now, that doesn't mean that I like the Rangers as much as I like Pittsburgh, especially because Taillon does do a pretty good job of inducing ground balls. But when you have bats in this order that, first of all, stack up pretty nicely, you have Gallo, Chu, and Mazzara, and then Rougned Odor back in the lineup, who is pretty inexpensive. Yeah, they're definitely going to be a top option. Now, the problem here is that when you're looking at Gallo and Chu and Mazzara, they're very expensive. 5,300, 5K, and 4,600 respectively on DraftKings. It's going to be tough to get stacks in there. I guess the only positive is you don't really have to pay a premium for any pitching here.
Makes sense as we roll through this 5-game slate. Let's go next to Yankees in Arizona. It's Tanaka and Kelly. I assume this is a day game, so the dome will be closed, so we shouldn't have the excess heat in Arizona for upside for the offensive bats. Tanaka has been known to give up the long ball from time to time. Merrill Kelly, somebody I think last slate I talked about when he was on, it was at Pittsburgh. He went, 7 innings, 5 Ks, 2 walks, did give up 2 home runs, but put up 21 DraftKings points on this slate. He is 7,400 against the Yankees lineup that doesn't have a ton of the power bats we may have seen in the past. Is there upside to Kelly? Do you like Tanaka, or is this a game for the bats to come out to play?
Kelly might not be the craziest option here, honestly. The guy's been pretty decent. He's throwing pretty hard. He's missing a decent amount of bats. And I said it on the Deeper Dive, or it might have been on the strategy show, that the Yankees could field like a possible World Series lineup with everyone that they have injured right now.
Yep.
It's really outrageous. It is. I don't want to say it's unprecedented, but it certainly seems that way, man. That they have this many injuries this early in the season. So normally I'd have zero interest here. Why would of course not. But this is just the Yankees lineup right now that is not imposing whatsoever. We're still dealing with injury. I don't know what the situation is with DJ LeMahieu. He was not in the lineup on Tuesday. So there's another guy who, I'm not saying he's great, but he doesn't strike out very often either. And then I believe Ursula was also hurt, right? And he wasn't in the lineup either. So the lineup that they ran out against Greinke was Gardner, Voit, Sanchez, Torres. So, okay, that's fine. Mike Tauchman, Cameron Maben, Estrada, Tyler Wade, and then Sabathia. Merrill Kelly also faces a pitcher. It's not the craziest idea. I know he doesn't have great swinging strike stuff, but he might just be able to go out there and throw, 7 one-run innings with 5 Ks, and you'd be happy with it. This is the Yankees team. It's a skeleton crew.
Yeah, and that's, I think, the right call in this situation, where at least Kelly needs to be on everybody's radar and part of at least the consideration for this early slate, simply because this lineup's lacking for the Yankees. And could it still have some power? Sure. Yankees are favored -120 on the money line, 8.5 over under. but Kelly needs to be part of at least your further research as you consider this slate of games. If you were to look to the other side, to Tanaka, any interest at 9,700?
That's a tough one. God, Tanaka's such a headache, man. I think on a slate like this, you could probably just make the argument that because he can get you a lot of strikeouts, he's worth considering. But I don't love him here. No, I don't love him. The guy below him, we're going to talk about in a moment, that's who I'd rather target. And I don't love either side of this. Tanaka's walking a ton of batters right now. I don't like what I'm seeing from him. And, when he doesn't have his control, it's really ugly. It's funny, too, because Tanaka's always going to have really good swinging strike stuff, except this year he has a 9% swinging strike rate. It's down from 14% last year, 15% the year before. Look, maybe just fluky and it'll balance itself out. But until then, I have some serious concerns about that. There's no reason that Tanaka should be missing this few bats. Like 7.7% swinging strikes on lefties, 12.9 to righties. Last year, 13.8 to lefties, 15.7 to righties. Year before that, 15 and 16.7. Like, I'm not necessarily sure what it is. I'll have to look more into it. But just on the surface, there are some serious concerns there.
Any bats that stand out to you specifically in this one?
Not really, no. Some Arizona bats might not be the craziest idea if they were cheaper. I just don't feel like paying a monster price point on like David Peralta and Ketel Marte against a guy who's still a good pitcher. They're too expensive.
Yeah, the price points jumped up considerably on them over the past week or so. You do have this last game, Baltimore and Chicago, the White Sox, and I assume your pitcher of the day, Carlos Rodon, against the Orioles.
You would be correct. I like Rodon, and I like this spot, and I think you know what, you kind of have to.
Right.
Have to just like him here. So it's that simple. Like, we don't even have to get that far into it. He gets a lot of strikeouts. His control's been way better this year. When he misses, he's not missing over the heart of the plate. You're still going to get some walks from him. That's par for the course with Rodon, but not as many guys that are going to punish you. Not a lot of speed in these on this Baltimore team. So there's nothing that really worries me about this matchup. Yeah, I think Rodon is a great play here. And if you're playing cash, you got to play Rodon.
Yeah, it feels like the right play, the right matchup to go after with the price tag of $9,400. Not overly excessively expensive. What about David Hess as a flyer on a 5-game slate against a White Sox team that does have a slightly elevated strikeout percentage, K percentage against right-handed pitchers?
Hold on a second. Say that again.
David Hess as a flyer against a White Sox team that has a slightly elevated strikeout percentage against right-handers.
Okay.
It's a 5-game slate. I'm trying to make content. I'm just.
I know. Listen, I don't think you're crazy.
I mean, you do think I'm crazy, but for various different reasons.
I just wanted to make sure I heard that correctly.
Fair.
They do strike out. They're not a very good offense.
Right.
And an interesting thing about them, though, is that they have a few guys that have been really solid this season, but it's the same thing I've been saying about them for probably a week plus now. I know Adam just saying the same thing on the deeper dive. And it won't be as tough on this slate to pay for them. But look how expensive a lot of these hitters are for Chicago. 55 for Anderson, 51 for Moncada, $5K for a break. They're like the most expensive at their position almost every day, which is insane. It's just pure insanity. Like, if you want to stack them today in this matchup, I guess it could work, because if you're playing Rodon and Jalen Beeks, you're going to have a lot of room, especially if you're going cheap at catcher or whatever. So obviously, this is a rare night where I'm willing, or a rare day where I'd say you can pay for the watch or Chicago bats, but I still don't. You know what? No, I think you might be on to something. If Hess is going to be completely overlooked and everyone's going to play Chicago, and he's literally cheaper than Ryan Stanek, who pitches 1 inning every day.
It's amazing.
Right. Look, David Hess is not good. This will likely turn out badly. But in the event that it doesn't, this could be a slate where you win a tournament with like 12 from your SP2.
There is a single game on the year where he has 33.7 DraftKings points. He also has a game where he's negative 12. So your floor and your ceiling may be far apart. Like you're talking vaulted, 3-level ceilings here and a subterranean floor. But it's still on a 5-game slate, one that doesn't have a ton of upside from a pitching perspective. At least worth considering if you can get every single upside bat in the best matchups you like. Maybe it's something on the radar. Let's talk quickly about some stacks. Hess, I assume targeting against them wouldn't be the craziest thing, but what are the stacks that stand out to you as the highest upside?
So the White Sox are still on there. There's no question. Boston, and then obviously Pittsburgh and Texas. So those are the ones right now that I would guess will be popular. Like I said, Tampa Bay is not crazy. I don't think Junis is crazy either, but it's one of these slates where you're probably going to have to make some adjustments or do some things different. And then look, this will be wildly unpopular, but if Carlos Rodon's going to be like 70%, I wouldn't be surprised if he's just astronomically owned. It might not be the craziest thing to actually consider. Oh wow, Stephen Curry to the locker room. Might not be crazy to consider some Baltimore stacks because Rodon is not impervious to getting lit up from time to time.
Oh, totally.
Yeah, and there are a few bats from the right side of the plate that aren't terrible in Baltimore. I mean, it's likely going to go against you, but we see the volatility. Marlins, Bauer still struck out 10, but the Marlins put up 4 runs on him early in that game, right? We see it happen quite often. Good pitchers have really bad games, and it's not like that can't happen today, and it can. And like I said, my guess would be that Rodon is really popular on this slate. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong, but I'd be very shocked if he wasn't.
If there was a poster child for MMEing, this slate is it. So like it feels like you want to cover as many bases as you can on this slate. There are a lot of different outcomes that are probably legitimately equally as probable. So Josh and Lofty and Adam cover that stuff much more than I do. I am playing handmade lineups as we go, but you look at this slate, there are multiple ways this can all turn out, and that's baseball, and we know that, but more so in this one because there's just so much going on in bad lineups against mediocre pitching and bad pitching against mediocre lineups. And you want to get exposure across a couple of different outcomes here and not just try to jam one lineup into multiple tournaments. So if you have an opportunity, even if it's in the quarter arcade on DK or you're playing the $1 or whatever it might be, you might want to look into some multiple lineups here, trying to figure out different outcomes that have some upside. And to Dave's point, talk ownership. We have the projections over at Osmo.com. Think about ownership. Think about how you might be able to hedge against that. Understand where the upside is, that if a Rodon is 75% owned, 70% owned, what you can get on the other side of that to maybe differentiate yourself for some upside. Dave, any final thoughts on the slate before we say so long?
No, just, excuse me. This might not be a bad day to try and be a little bit different because it sure seems like a lot of the attention is going to be focused on 1 or 2 pitchers because, they're facing Baltimore or, they're in this park. That's probably what everyone's going to do. So while it's obviously the most sensible on paper, baseball doesn't always prove to be the most sensible sport from a results standpoint.
That is a fairly accurate statement. Find Dave on Twitter at Lofty_D, LOUGHY_D. Find me at Dan Strafford. And of course, it's at Osmo_com. Tomorrow morning, you get EMAC, you get Adam. Dave and I are back Friday morning. EMAC and Adam again Saturday. You get the MLB strategy show first thing in the morning on Wednesday. Then you get the deep dive written by Dave, deeper dive at 5 p.m., and then live before lock after that. With all that said, wish you the best of luck in Wednesday's early slate. You've been listening to the DFS Early Bird presented by Yahoo Sports.